We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Rick Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vegan Compass podcast. We're so excited to have you with us listening again this week. We are your co-hosts Rick Allport and Mackenzie Cross. And if you're enjoying the Vegan Compass podcast, it would mean so much to us if you could leave us a review, because that really helps to boost the podcast in the episode rankings and get it out to more people. And we'd also love to hear from you. So leave us a comment on social media, on YouTube, or on Spotify, because sometimes it does feel like we're just sort of talking into the ether. So engage with us. Let us know if you're enjoying the podcast. So
and don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. So how are you today, Mackenzie?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Rick?
I am very well, thank you. And I'm feeling very honoured here today.
Yes,
because
it's a big one.
Yeah, we got a really special guest here. So I'm going to introduce her now. Emma Hurst. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi there, and thank you, first of all, both of you, for having me on. So my name is Emma Hurst and I'm a Member of Parliament in New South Wales Parliament for the Animal Justice Party.
Excellent. A lot of us sort of know you in that role, but you haven't sort of always been a politician. So what did you do before you became a politician?
Good question. So look, I was actually a registered psychologist before I became a politician, but I still worked in the animal space. So I was at university when I really realised what was actually happening behind closed doors in the animal agribusiness industry. And I was studying education at the time, and I actually switched to psychology. And the reason why I switched to psychology is because I could see that animal protection and animal cruelty was a human-caused issue, and therefore we needed a human-focused solution. So I realised that I really needed to understand people better and how we actually change behaviours. So I ended up doing my master's in health psychology, and health psychologists look at things like how do you convince entire populations to wear seatbelts, how do you convince entire populations to quit smoking, and I wanted to know how do we convince entire populations to stop eating animal products or not to go to the zoo, not to go to circuses. And so I worked then for a very long time in the animal protection space. I have worked in psych spaces as well, but I spent 10 years at Animal Liberation. I also worked as a media officer at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And I also worked for World Animal Protection International. And a lot of the work that I did at World Animal Protection was around similar to what we have in government, which is colloquially called the nudge unit. So how do you actually study human behaviour, run a campaign to actually nudge people to change their behaviour, and then assessing whether or not people have actually changed their behaviour. So that's sort of what I was doing and really focused on before I got into politics. So I've been working in the space for well over a decade before I ended up with the AJP.
That's just like an incredible history, and I want to take you back a little bit even further, because I read online that you became an animal activist at a very young age. So when did your activism path actually start?
Yeah, so when I was really young, we rescued some cats from the Cat Protection Society. And, I just absolutely fell in love with these cats. And one of them was rescued for me. And so I just built a very strong bond with this animal. And I remember as a young child sitting there holding a hen, and I realised that the hen was purring and that she was showing joy the same way as my rescue cat at home showed joy. And I remember going home and writing letters to my parents, telling them that I wanted to go vegetarian. But of course, it was actually many years later that I really discovered that what was happening in the egg industry with male chicks being macerated soon after birth, what was happening in the dairy industry with dairy calves being stolen from their mothers and sent to slaughter. So even though I had this really strong connection with animals and compassion towards animals, like so many people, I was actually a naive vegetarian for a very long period of time. I didn't really understand what was actually happening within this industry, and it's not until I was much older and I really learnt what was happening that I became a full advocate for animals.
I had much a similar process. I went vegetarian quite young, and I just never connected to how animals in the dairy and egg industry were being exploited. And I even remember people asking me if there was any problems with eggs or dairy. And I was, no, chickens naturally lay eggs and cows naturally make milk. I had no idea until I saw a video from PETA that exposed those industries. And yeah, I think it's one of those things that's very hidden. A lot of people don't realize the cruelty that happens in those industries.
Well, I actually like the fact that both you and Emma have very much in common. You're both crazy cat ladies and you're both crazy chook ladies.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Of course.
I'm happy to have anything in common with Emma.
I think that's why we get along so well.
Wonderful. So you also have had a really interesting journey as a vegan bodybuilder, and you've won some gold medals in the process. So how did you get into the world of bodybuilding, and did you get any negative reactions as a vegan? And I guess it's also quite a male-dominated space. So how did you feel as a female, as a bodybuilder?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I had started doing some half marathons and was really enjoying running, and I needed a new challenge. And so prior to running in some half marathons, I'd actually done some weights for women courses and found them really it was just sort of that sort of self-inspiration where you could start to learn, okay, actually, maybe I can do a chin up here. And so I sort of thought, I want to go back into that space. And it was interesting because I was going to a gym that was sort of more focused around bodybuilders. And I didn't feel like it was too heavily male because it was really 50-50 within that gym and within the groups that I was in. However, when people found out I was vegan, I was told that, you know, it's going to be too hard to be able to do it as a vegan. I was also 37 at the time, and people had sort of said, oh, I think you're a bit too old to be doing this as well. It's going to be hard to build muscle. And so I ended up hiring a coach. I had Chrissy Cavallo, who's a vegan bodybuilder, and she's a coach. And it was really interesting because they design you a meal plan, and so they give you food to eat. And the feedback I was getting from everybody else that was training was, oh, no, you can't be eating bananas. Oh, no, you can't be eating oats. And it was almost kind of this sort of eye roll of like, you know, she's never going to be ready for stage because, you know, she's, you know, heaven forbid, you know,
she's eating
carbohydrates. Yeah, exactly. And they were eating either chicken or fish and broccoli 3 times a day. And it was really interesting. I remember when I was being coached and Chrissy was saying to me that you can actually get to stage without damaging your health. And I think so many people push their bodies to such an extreme. When you're eating an extreme diet of, you know, chicken and fish and broccoli 3 times a day, I mean, you can imagine how much damage that's going to do to your body, and even in that short period of time of several weeks. But her philosophy was actually, I can get you to stage and you'll actually be in a state of really good health as well. And so I was actually able to not just compete in one bodybuilding season, which there's 2 seasons a year. I did 2 seasons back to back, which most people will never do because they need the next season to recover and get their health back on track from having done season A. However, because I was in a state of health, it was just a matter of actually maintaining it for the next season. So I was able to do both season A and season B, which was great. And of course, you know, made it to stage and proved, of course, that, you know, a vegan diet is absolutely easy on the stage in regards to bodybuilding. And of course, I was still an amateur, but I look up still to people like Chrissy Cavallo and so many others on Instagram who are really doing this, for a very long time, for many, many years, and they're competing in the pro series and really showing what vegans can do.
I find it really interesting, because we've heard all the stories of vegans can't open the door, vegans can't do this, vegans can't do that. And I was listening to Earthling Ed's podcast. I hadn't actually realised he had a podcast before, but so I've started right back at the beginning. And he's talking about when the vegan mountain climber wanted to get to the top of Everest, and she got to the top of Everest, but very, very sadly passed away. And of course, all the media jumped on and said, look, vegan couldn't even do that, blah, blah, blah. Vegan died on the mountain, without actually saying how many other people have died on the mountain. But then Ed quite rightly pointed out, there was a vegan mountain climber who was, I think he held the record for climbing the highest peaks in each country in a record amount of time. Nobody actually ever, the media didn't get a hold of that. So it's really interesting you say what you say. But also the thing with the diets these people on, their bodies are always in a state of ketosis. So no wonder their bodies are failing on them so often, but you've come in and eaten an incredibly healthy diet and been able to do the back-to-back, bodybuilding. Yeah. So it's really amazing. But you've had such an incredible background and you've done so many, wonderful things in your background. What then brought you into Animal Justice Party? Because, that's a whole new stage of where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I was working in those organisations, I was really focused on campaign work and changing corporations. And so when someone approached me and asked me if I would consider running for the Animal Justice Party, I really had to think about where I was best placed for animals. And so I could see organizations doing amazing work in this space. I could see organizations, getting airlines to put vegan menus forward. I could see people working with Woolworths and Coles to phase out battery caged eggs, for example. So the movement was making really good progress in these areas. But when you look at the space politically, in New South Wales, we had introduced a ban on greyhound racing and then the government backflipped. We had seen, major exposés of really extreme cruelty from slaughterhouses throughout the state and in other states as well. And every time we saw governments and ministers standing up and saying this was one bad apple. And in the end, they did decide to take action, but the action that they decided to take was to introduce legislation to criminalise those who actually expose this footage from inside slaughterhouses to try to make the problem go away, rather than actually fix the problem that was happening inside these slaughterhouses and within these very cruel factory farms as well. So we could see how far back politics were. I could see a lot of people, on the street convincing individuals to change their behaviour to go vegan, doing fantastic work there, of course, the corporate work. And I just thought, what, we absolutely have to be in Parliament. We absolutely have to be a voice in that space, because that's where we're really failing in regards to animal protection. And even though organisations were trying to lobby, we're lobbying from the outside, and we needed to have a voice on the inside for animals. And so that's why I decided to run.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's definitely a great place in Parliament where we can actually, be there when the change is happening and put animals on the agenda, because otherwise no one else is going to consider animals.
100%.
So I'm just curious to know, when you were campaigning, what the climate was like at the time. I'm not sure who you were running up against, but did you actually sort of think you had a good chance of winning your seat, or did it come as a massive surprise?
No, I think we thought that we had a pretty good chance. So in the previous election, we had Mark Pearson elected, and then in the Victorian election, it was actually only very small amount of period while we were still working on my election campaign that we had Andy Medic elected in Victoria. And so that really built a momentum where we thought, okay, we don't solidly have this seat. We're going to have to fight for it. But we knew that there was a genuine chance, so it wasn't a total surprise. And so, I had done a lot of work around campaigning. And so, we were doing a lot of social media campaigns. We were trying to get as much media involved as possible. And of course, we had a lot of boots on the ground as well, with people talking, handing out how to vote cards. And we know even these simple moves really make a big difference for animals, because we've looked at the data from every time we've run an election, and where we have a volunteer at a polling booth, we nearly double our votes at that particular polling booth. So it makes a huge difference that we had a huge number of people who are willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to give up a day, I'm willing to give up a few days to really fight to get animals a voice in Parliament. And so the win that we got was really a shared win. And I remember then we had a really long period while they had to count the votes. And then we go to this small little room in the city, and they announce those final seats. And the media had been predicting that there was an outside chance that I might get one of those final seats. And so we were sitting there was a group of us together, and they've got these TVs, and all the different names come up, and then there was a few sort of spots at the bottom, and then they all came up very quickly. And I looked at the last one, and it said Rod Roberts, One Nation. And I went, oh, and Michael, who was next to me, he said, oh, you're in. And I said, no, that says Rod Roberts. And Michael said, no, you didn't come last. And so there was this moment of like, oh, hang on, where am I then? So we came second last. So this whole outside chance that she might get elected became a very solid seat. We didn't take the last seat, we took the second last seat. And so, now I've been in there for 6.5 years.
Oh, wow. I sort of remember back to when it was happening, and I remember getting, somebody rang me and she said, Emma's in, and I'm dancing around the house. And of course, as you know, Mackenzie and I were both AJP Queensland at the time. And we were just celebrating so much that you had got in. It was just such a fantastic result to happen. Now, I know you've been doing some amazing things over the last 6.5 years. How can it be 6.5 years already?
Doesn't feel like that long.
Yeah, but then when you look
Emma.
at the track record, well, you look at the track record of how much you've done in 6.5 years, and I'm exhausted just reading it. But you've had some incredible wins. The Crush videos. You brought to light all these different campaigns. You've also worked in the domestic violence area, so you haven't just stuck with the animal issues. You've talked on other issues that really count. But now, what are some of the issues that you and your team are now currently working on?
So at the moment, one of our big pieces of work that we're working on, we've got a bill that we're pushing to go forward. And just a bit of a trigger warning there around what this bill's about, but it's about animal sexual abuse. So we've done a fair bit of work in this space, and our work with the police in this space has been really eye-opening as well. We have some of the best laws now in New South Wales because of the changes that we've made. So we've brought in lifetime animal bans for anybody that's convicted of animal sexual abuse. And we've also outlawed crush videos as well. And we're the only state now that has outlawed these videos. Don't look them up if you don't know what it means. It's a fetish animal cruelty video. And we met with the police recently and also heard about the frustration from police in other states that they can't catch people for these for this criminal conduct, but because it's only considered a criminal conduct in New South Wales. We also introduced a law that ban the possession, distribution and production of animal sexual abuse material. And this only exists in a couple of states in Australia as well. In other states, it's perfectly legal, which is absolutely ridiculous. So we were quite shocked actually when we were contacted by people who work in this space to prosecute people for animal sexual abuse, and to hear that the laws were still not going far enough in New South Wales. And so this most recent bill that we've put forward actually redefines bestiality. We've changed the name to animal sexual abuse to call it out for what it is. And we've also expanded the definition. In New South Wales, there is no definition. And we thought that that would be fine, that the courts could interpret it. But unfortunately, the courts have interpreted it to be penetrative only. And of course, a lot of people who are committing acts of animal sexual abuse are getting away with these acts because the definition isn't being considered broad enough. So we've changed that definition within this act, and we've been working very closely with the Attorney General here in New South Wales to get this through. Again, New South Wales would be the first one to really broaden out the definition of animal sexual abuse, but we really need to make sure that we're leading the way in this space. You know, a lot of the times people who are prosecuted for animal sexual abuse are also prosecuted for child sexual abuse. These perpetrators are the same people. There's a significant number of people in New South Wales jails that have either been charged or convicted with both offences. So these are extremely dangerous people, and it's really important that our laws capture them within the legislation. So we're working on that. We're also working, of course, on getting the greyhound racing ban back in. That's something that we've been really pushing for, and we've been passing a whole lot of. It's kind of like an FOI or a GIPA, but in Parliament it's called an SO52. So it's a call for government papers, and we've got a significant number of whistleblowers that we're working with within the industry, and so we know exactly what's actually happening within greyhound racing. We recently exposed the Alex Britton report within greyhound racing New South Wales, and that was quite explosive, but we've got a lot more as well that we know is happening within this industry, and it's only a matter of time that the government can't continue to fight to maintain this industry, to use our taxpayers' money to prop up this industry, given what we know is happening behind closed doors within this industry. And we're going to continue to expose them until the government runs out of excuses. Sorry, Rick.
I was going to just say, I've been watching Animal Kind's footage from Queensland, because we were protesting when I was living in Queensland. We did a lot of protests about the new track that they were going to have, which is the straight track. And before that track even opened, in the trial period, I think there was something like 7 or 8 greyhound deaths on track. And this is on a supposedly safe track. I mean, it's absolutely obscene, this industry. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
No, I appreciate it. And I think, when you look overseas and the fact that we're one of the last countries in the world that still allows this to happen, it's just ridiculous. The other things we're focused on is the Independent Office of Animal Protection, which was an election commitment from the Labor government, but we're very nervous about where they're taking that now. And we've also been working on baboons as well. We have a facility here in New South Wales where baboons are being bred and then rented out for medical experimentation. So we've been doing a whole lot of investigations into that breeding facility and the use of taxpayers' money to prop up the breeding of primates for medical experimentation. And of course, we've been fighting the Shooters Party on a deal that they recently did with Labor to introduce hunting in state forests and other public land. And of course, there's the obvious animal cruelty that will come out of a bill like this, but, we've also been speaking with domestic violence group and gun safety organisations who are absolutely horrified, because these are public spaces, these are shared spaces. They're talking about over 50,000 hectares of shared public outdoor spaces, which people like to go with their families, with their friends, to have picnics, to go for walks, to take their dogs as well. You can't take a dog into a national park, but I believe you can take them into some state forests, for example. Now there may be, if the bill passes, we're talking about people being in there with guns, and of course they're fighting to have access to prohibited weapons. Particularly they want silencers to be able to be hunting within these shared public spaces. So We've been fighting hard against that. It's very difficult because obviously Labor's come up with this deal with them. We did manage to get the Coalition, the Greens, and enough members of the crossbench. So we got 2 independent MPs and the Libertarians to agree to help us send the bill to an inquiry. So the deal, I think, was that, the bill had to get passed in the last 2 weeks, but it's now gone off to an inquiry. So we will continue to fight against that as well.
So I'm really curious about this one, because I've been reading and following what you've been doing. What is the actual deal that the Labor Party and the shooters and fishers have done to get this through?
So Labor's currently got up a very unpopular workers' compensation bill, and so which will gut protections for the most vulnerable workers in New South Wales. Essentially, it'll leave people who are currently receiving workers' compensation with no money, even if they can't return to work. So this bill has had the unions fighting desperately against it, and of course people who are vulnerable workers. And so we've been hearing how terrible this bill is. And of course, as the Animal Justice Party, it's really important that, we don't sell our votes. We don't sell out on human rights, in favour of animal rights. But of course, when you have other parties on the crossbench, they don't necessarily come in with those ethics. They come in with, we want this and this is all we want. And so when we have other parties on the crossbench that are willing to negotiate and to trade votes, for example, for pieces of legislation, then it becomes very, very dangerous within Parliament. But of course, the government, even with the shooters' vote on the workers' compensation bill, don't have enough people to support the workers' compensation bill. So they've kind of got themselves into a really, really, it's just a ridiculous position that they've gotten themselves in, because, they're working with the wrong people. They're making the wrong decisions in regards to making deals of any kind. And then, of course, when you make a deal, then you upset other members of the crossbench like myself, who are obviously going to be very much against this bill. And the Shooters Party has tried to get this bill through previously with the last Liberal National Government. And they've been very open about the fact that the shooters had put it forward as a deal, and the Liberals agreed. And then when the shooters voted for their legislation, then they decided not to actually go ahead with the deal that they had done with the shooters. Whereas now I think that the shooters think that they're going to get the same deal with Labor, where the coalition actually screwed them over.
It's interesting because Labor is supposed to be the people's party and for the workers. To hear that they're screwing the workers on workers' compensation, that's just ludicrous.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm going to be honest, I feel a bit sick to my stomach, like just hearing about all of the work that you have to do every day. I can't even imagine reviewing all of that kind of footage, the animal sexual abuse footage, the greyhound racing footage, having to deal with the idiot shooters and fishers. I don't know how you do it. But let's spin it on a little bit more of a positive note. And I would love to hear about how you sort of get creative with bringing on side other members of Parliament to support, traction for animals.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because we obviously, as someone with a campaign background, I obviously bring that in when I'm trying to get the numbers for legislation. We've passed 4 bills in New South Wales Parliament, which no other crossbench member has done before. So we take our campaign tools and we use it within Parliament. So to give you an example of this, we brought on a bill that we knew that cats and dogs were being used in medical experimentation. And when I queried if we could rehome those cats and dogs prior to me being elected, I offered all those research facilities to step in and actually rehome those animals. The response I got was really shocking. They said, we don't rehome these animals. We kill them when they're no longer needed, because we don't really want people to know that cats and dogs are being used in medical experimentation, because we think there might be this massive public outcry. So I put in a piece of legislation to mandate that these animals are actually rehomed. And we ended up on my inaugural speech, we got our first dog out of a medical experimentation facility. And so this woman adopted Buddy. He was one of the first dogs to come out of one of these facilities. And so he had won over the hearts of someone that worked there who really wanted to sort of step in and make sure he wasn't killed. And so Buddy still lives with Patrice, who's an amazing advocate for Buddy and for animals like him. And so what I did was, when I put this piece of legislation up, we organised to bring Buddy into Parliament the day before the legislation went up for debate. And so I had to get special permission, and I got Buddy into my office, and then I sent an email to everyone in Parliament, which is actually the email address, everyone in Parliament. And I said, hey, there's a dog in my office. Everyone's welcome to come to my office. And there was a queue down the hallway of people who wanted to come in and meet Buddy. And of course, we made sure we went to all the hard right crossbenchers, and we said, oh, come and meet this dog. You know, he's been rescued from a medical experimentation facility. So they came into my office and they met this dog and they interacted with this dog. And then the next day I said, oh, look, I've got this piece of legislation up for debate today. Do you remember Buddy, who you met yesterday? They're killing dogs like Buddy because they don't want people to know that they're using them in medical experimentation. But if we pass this bill today, then we can actually stop them from killing these animals. And I knew I had Labor and I had the Greens, but I needed more than that. And we ended up getting more than, I needed one extra vote, and we ended up getting both Fred Nile from the Christian Democrats, but also one of the Shooters Party as well, to vote for the legislation. And so that passed very easily in the upper house. And then it was a much easier process to then pass it in the lower house, and the government ended up just agreeing to work with us to pass it.
That's so cool. I have tears in my eyes.
Yeah, I know. I remember seeing part of the story of Buddy, and to hear the whole story is just a beautiful thing. We spoke recently with Nikki from Beagle Freedom.
And she's brilliant.
Yeah, she's a lovely lady, and she just told us, and we're both sitting here, and I think if the cameras were closer on our face, you would have seen the tears coming down our faces.
Yeah,
it's
just such a powerful reminder of how the animals are their own best advocates, and also bravo to you on your campaign skills, because that's an excellent way to get everyone to connect.
That's just absolutely brilliant. I love that. And it actually, that could have been one of the highlights of what you've done. But our next question is, have there been any standout wins apart from Buddy that you're especially proud of? And it's something that's really made you feel like, this is why I'm here.
Yeah, look, I think probably the standout win for me was when we outlawed forced swim and forced smoking experiments. Mm-hmm. So that was actually a recent bill that we passed. And the reason why that's a standout bill is because when I first got elected, we started making changes around animal sexual assault laws. We made changes around, rehoming cats and dogs from medical experimentation. And I could move politicians from where they were to caring about a dog, or move them towards being against, being supportive of tougher legislation on animal cruelty, things like that. But the smoking experiments and the forced swim experiments were happening to mice and to rats. And so that was the first piece of legislation where we got the majority of politicians in both houses to care about mice and rats, who are animals that are usually not given much compassion by our society. And it was a long journey to get there. We ran an upper house inquiry into the use of animals in medical experimentation. We had a lot of people in this space talk about how absolutely cruel these experiments were, that they are not scientific. And we ended up getting the Labor Party across the line on these experiments. But again, I had to get many more people across the line to be able to pass this as legislation. We ended up getting there. We ended up getting, again, the majority of politicians. So in this term of Parliament, I've got to, even if I have the government, I need it's government plus 6 more votes. And so we ended up getting quite a few people supporting us on this legislation across different parties who looked at what was happening. And we're the first place in the world that I'm aware of that has outlawed the forced swim test. This is something that I was working on when I was working at PETA, when I was working at Animal Liberation, that animals were being dropped into buckets or beakers of water and forced to swim, often accidentally drowning and dying. It was just absolutely horrific. And of course, those experiments were being done for so-called depression research. Now, as a former psychologist, I can tell you that an animal fighting for survival has, and running on their survival instincts, has nothing to do with a chronic human condition like depression. You're not studying depression. So it's really fantastic that we were able to pass that legislation and to actually create a precedent for everywhere else around the world, because that's something that I often go in with when we're fighting to change different laws. You know, when we change the laws around breeding for dolphins and whales for entertainment, we said, look, it's been outlawed here, it's been outlawed there. You know, it's already been done elsewhere. We can do the same thing here. With the forced smoking, the forced swim test, there was nowhere for me to point to, but now everywhere else in the world can actually point to us. So I'm hoping that this change that we've built in New South Wales can be replicated elsewhere because of the work we've done.
God, now I'm tearing up. It's like just the thought of these poor animals.
I know.
You know, just, I don't want to even think about it. I talk about it, but we just can't.
What's going to give us depression is that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We just can't thank you enough for everything you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good that Australia can be leading the way on something, because God knows we're
sorry. I know. And that's why it was like, you know, what's your biggest moment? It's like, we're leading on something.
And it's like, rats and mice.
Like we're almost 10 years behind everywhere else in the world to be for something to be leading in. It's just like, oh, finally.
That's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Good work. So I guess it's time to touch on some aspects of mental health, because we know this mission for animal protection is, I guess sometimes it feels like it's out of reach. So how do you keep sight of that mission amidst all of the horrible things that you have to deal with every day, and I guess make sure that you don't burn out as well?
Yeah, look, I think that part of it is recognizing that we will burn out. And just having all those coping strategies and your own personal coping mechanisms known to you before that happens. Noticing those early warning signs, stepping back and making sure you apply those coping strategies. And those coping strategies will be completely different for everyone. You know, for some people it might be going for a run, and other people might be going to yoga. But it might be, you know, going away on a holiday and stepping away completely. And for other people it might be, you know, just being able to go out and spend time with like-minded people. It's interesting. I know that, you know, I often get invited to different events for animal protection, and I go when I can, but it's always interesting when I do go to something and it's been a really hard sitting fortnight and people say like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're now here. And I say, no, it's just really nice to remember that actually there's some really good people in the world. And actually this is really quite refreshing, because you kind of get stuck in this one place where you think, oh, nobody cares. And then when you actually reconnect with community. And so, you know, I think sometimes we undervalue those community events where we go to dinner with other vegans and other animal rights activists, when we go to conferences and meet up with everybody. That's community, that's seeing like-minded people, and that's actually a place for support and being able to talk about our wins as well. And that's the other aspect, I think, of continuing to motivate ourselves going forward, is to always stop and look back at what we've won and what we've achieved as well. Because I think when we're constantly fighting, and, you know, the last sitting week, you know, I felt constantly on defense with this bill, with the Shooters Party coming up, and various other things that we're fighting for, and when I'm not feeling like we're getting where we want to be. But it's so important then to just sit down and look back at what we've already achieved and how far we've actually come.
Look, I can fully understand, and I wish I'd had advice like that before my disastrous time in 2020. But we won't go into that. We've covered that quite a bit in the podcast. But yeah, trying to work your way back is a challenging thing. And I think that's the best advice that you've given to people, that you do need to look after yourself. You do need to reach out to people. You do need to be active in our community, in our family, because we're all family. We need to support each other. We need to support all our vegan businesses and organisations. And you can't be at everything, and we're all time poor. But we can do little bits and pieces that can help create wins. So yeah, thank you for those words of positive encouragement for people. That's a really lovely thing. And this is probably part of your being a registered psychologist, how has this helped you in your advocacy for animals?
Yeah, so, as I said before, my background was actually in health psychology. So how do we create mass behavior change? And so I have been able to luckily pull that into a lot of the work that we've done, to understand who we're working with, what we're up against, and then how do we get from A to B. And so the way we always run my campaigns in my office is we start at the end. And so you think, well, what does it look like if we've got the win that we want? And then how do we get there? Who is going to be able to influence this decision? Who has influenced this in the past? Who needs to change? Who do we have that are our allies? Who are going to be our opponents on this? And if we're like, what are the different steps that we need to go through to get to this final destination, and then work backwards? And I always find that's the easiest way to get somewhere. And then I often find that even as we start to run the campaign, of course, it goes off onto, a whole lot of different tangents. But definitely it's interesting because so many people say to me, what should I study at university? What would be the best thing to study to get into animal protection? And of course, we always need more lawyers. So animal law is a good one. I feel like we need a lot more people that are great at comms, at media, for example, as well. I think that's a really strong space. But I still think psychology is a really important space. And I don't know that we've got a few really great people in this space, but I think it's something that can be expanded, because I think that when we can understand people and understand how we actually change behavior, or how we come at a problem from a different angle to change behavior, then we can make significant changes that's going to affect large communities of people.
Yeah, that's really impactful. And obviously, being in the public space, you receive a lot of scrutiny, you've received a lot of threats. So how do you navigate that and not let it affect you?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I think there's kind of two groups. I think that there's the threats and the negative comments from our opponents. And I think in one way it's more serious, but on another way it's easier to not emotionally attach yourself to it, because these are the people who are usually harming animals. If they're sending death threats, for example, these are the people that we're up against. And so in one way it sort of doesn't emotionally attach, even though sometimes it can be difficult. And then sometimes you might get some hate mail from people who are also animal advocates or animal rights people. And I think that's always so much harder and so much more emotionally difficult. And I think you've got to stop and remember why people are sending these messages. So when it's the opponents, it's usually because they're threatened by the work that we're doing. If they thought we were nobody, they probably wouldn't bother to put something down. They're obviously very scared of us being successful. They've seen that we've been successful in the past, and they want to scare us and shut us down. So that kind of then exposes their motivations. And what I have found that is, if it's somebody within the community that says, you're not doing enough or you're not doing things right, that it's usually coming from a place of, them not actually doing enough and them not doing things the right way. And so they're looking for somebody else to say, well, you'll need to do it. And therefore, then they can sort of alleviate that guilt. So for both of those situations, I just don't respond. You've just got to keep moving. You've got to remember that, that anger or that the nasty comments and things like that is coming from them, and that's their problem. And to actually try to sort of compartmentalize that, focus on the people that do have your back and continue to work with them.
Absolutely.
I find it really bizarre that people in our community would be sending these sorts of messages. And I remember seeing, with the work I do with Kangaroos Alive, there was a post I did. Georgie had gone on radio and was talking about kangaroos and, what had been happening. And one of the comments came in and it said, why didn't she mention koalas? See what you know what's happening about koalas. And I just sent her a message and just said, you do know that she had 5 minutes and she had a specific talking point, and she's talked about koalas and she's been advocating for koalas, but this was something different. And the lady just wouldn't let up. It's like, she should have talked more about koalas. And I'm just going, wow, please just go away. It's like,
yeah.
I ended up having to block her from the page because she was just unrelenting. And I'm thinking, I'm glad Georgie's not seeing this because it's just too much. But also I remember just seeing recently your post about the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party saying, you're not getting these messages, you're lying, it's all this crap, and, you're putting up all the messages that you have been receiving. I mean, what did they think that they were going to try and prove by saying you're lying when you have the evidence?
Yeah, I'm trying not to get into their heads. It's probably a pretty dangerous place to go to.
Yeah.
Look, I think, their strategy has often been denial. And I mean, it was interesting because obviously I normally cover the names and the faces of the people commenting, because I don't want sort of any kind of incident where, something goes back to those people. But in the most recent one, I didn't cover the faces and names because they're accusing us now of making this up. And that's the problem, isn't it? And this is the whole problem with all this really nasty behavior over social media, is there's absolutely no accountability and absolutely nothing gets done about it either. I've been talking about it in Parliament and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about, female MPs, being threatened with violence, being given death threats. I mean, it's an absurd situation when you think any other workplace, this would never be acceptable whatsoever. Inciting violence towards other MPs is absolutely hideous. And of course, one of the shooters alluded to putting me on the spit at the next party barbecue in the House during debate. And of course, nobody has anything to say about it. And so it just really exposes what actually happens in Parliament. And of course, behind closed doors, people are saying to me, oh, we can't, we're really against this and we're absolutely disgusted by this, but we can't really do anything because we might need their vote. You cannot have a situation where you turn a blind eye to violence towards women or violence towards anybody else in a workplace, because, you might need them for something. So we've got
toxic,
this really,
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I guess just it's the nature of needing other people's votes for your bills, but it's, at what detriment? Like, that's quite disturbing, that people are willing to let violence sort of go under the radar.
Yeah, just to grab a vote.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And this is what I love about, you, Georgie, and Mark, and also Andy when he was in, that you weren't trying to make deals, because to me, Animal Justice Party politicians are activists who've moved into the ultimate stage of being able to make change. So you've taken activism to the highest possible level, and I think that's just absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this has been just one of these like every episode we do, we just get to this point and go, oh man, we love doing this podcast. It's just so good to hear the stories and hear, yes, there are some tough stories we hear, but there's also all the positivity that comes through, especially from people like yourself.
And I think that would be the key message that I want people to take away. Like, yes, all of these are really heavy topics, but as Emma said, you know, you need that community and you need that positivity. So take those, the jewels of positivity, that there are amazing people in our movement who are doing this work every day for animals.
I think too, a reminder, and it's something I talk about a lot when I go out and do talks, is if you go and do activism with a group, don't just go home. Stay, talk to people, and enjoy. And I think we're about to get a special guest star on our.
Yeah, I don't know if you could hear him.
Yeah.
My little 19-year-old cat. He turns 20 in September.
Oh my goodness, he does not.
He does not look like he's about to turn 20.
Oh, he's so sweet.
Oh, but yeah, so everybody, please, if you're doing activism, please make sure that you have time to detox, debrief, go out and have a fun meal, go and do something interesting with the group of people you've been with. Talk about the stupid people who've come up and given you the usual stupid comments that you get, bacon, all that crap. Laugh at them.
Yeah,
debrief.
Yeah,
debrief, enjoy, and find joy in what you're doing, because if you don't find that joy, you'll burn out, you will leave.
Yep.
And we lose too many great activists from that happening.
Definitely.
So now, coming to the end of a brilliant chat, what's next for you and the Animal Justice Party? Are there any upcoming campaigns listeners should be keep an eye out for? Plus also, you'll be coming up for re-election soon, so I urge everybody to get behind you. When you're answering that, please let us know when that's going to happen so we can start preparing people.
Absolutely. So I'm in for another year and a half. So it'll come up sooner than we always think it will. So obviously we've got the rest of this year, and then we've got all of next year as well to keep pushing for animal protection. And then the following year we'll be up for election around March. And so hopefully we'll be drumming things up well before then, to really showcase to people why we need a voice for animals in Parliament. In regards to sort of our upcoming campaigns, we've been working quite closely with our state office on a variety of issues. So we've been working on things like battery cages. Our state office as well is helping us work on the greyhounds as well. We've actually just found out at the end of last week that Cumberland Council is planning to shoot a whole lot of pigeons. So I was tipped off by a journalist on that. So we've been fighting that one as well. That's a new one that's just sort of being dumped on us. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots and lots of campaigns. If you're following me, I also encourage you to follow Animal Justice Party New South Wales. They're always helping us with our campaign, and also making sure if people want to really get more involved, we have regional groups as well within the New South Wales state electorate. And so our state office can help you get connected with one of those regional groups, and those regional groups will often support some of the campaigns that are either being done by the state office or by my office. And so we work quite closely together to make sure that those campaigns are complementing each other, and that all of our fantastic supporters and volunteers and members can actually get behind and help us on those. And the state office also often has different actions that people can take. So it might be quickly, we need everybody to email the Premier about this particular issue because, the decision's going to be made in the next, 48 hours. Or we might have a petition that we want to present to a minister, and we want to get as many signatures on it as possible before we present that petition. So there's lots of different campaigns, and we'll have different strategies for each campaign that we will call on people for their support for. So make sure you sign up to the e-newsletter from the state office. Sign up to your regional group as well if you want to get involved. And of course, most of our campaigns wouldn't get anywhere unless we had the people power behind them. When I in Parliament, I think that's what really gives us an edge over the other politicians, is that, when we expose something, we expose it to a significant number of people over social media. We expose it to email lists, which are, tens of thousands of people are on these email lists. And so, actually, I think there's hundreds of thousands now, which is fantastic, because it means that, we can get that information about what's actually happening in Parliament out to the people who actually care about animals and get them to take action. So before AJP was ever in Parliament, as I said, they used to ignore animal issues. Nobody was ever talking about it. It was completely ignored. Now that we're in there, now that we know what's going on, we can actually alert the public can take action. And the government knows, of course, that all of us and all of those voices will be watching and speaking out.
Yeah,
I think the regional groups, this is something that I want to just reiterate to everybody. I actually just went and did a talk for AJP Northwest, and great group of people. We just had a really interesting night, a lot of backwards and forwards and questions. It was a really good thing. Happy to do that talk for any of the AJP regional groups. But I know that when we were in Queensland, and I was Queensland convener, and you were up on the, what did we call you? The North.
I was in Townsville,
Yeah.
North Queensland.
the North Queensland, person up there, and we had the regional groups in Queensland, and we created such a good sort of power there by having those groups. So everybody, please get involved in the regional groups. It is one of the best ways to support AJP.
We'll put some links in the show notes as well, so people can find you on social media and AJP New South Wales, and also maybe the link to sign up as a member.
And if we find any of the regional groups, we can drop them in as well.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well,
This has been such an impactful conversation. I mean, we know you're doing amazing work for animals, Emma, you and your team, but just to hear some of those wins and be kept up to date on what you're working on at the moment is really great. And we know you're super busy as well. So thank you so much for giving us some time on your evening.
Yeah, I don't know when you do have time, so we're very, very grateful for that time that you've given us. You've given us like an hour, and we actually feel a little bit guilty from taking you away.
Anything for you two. Anything for you two. You two have always been fantastic. Every time I've been lucky enough to see you both in person, it's always, you guys have just always been so supportive of both my work and my team's work, and always pushing the good message out there. So thank you to both of you.
Well,
Thank you.
You're just so inspiring, and I just would remind you that the Animal Rights Forum is in Sydney next year. So we're going to drag you into that, of course.
Of course.
Well, folks, this brings us to the end of yet another brilliant episode with the incredible Emma Hurst. It's just been, again, inspiring, and we can't thank you enough, Emma, for absolutely everything you do. We love you. We love everything you stand for. We both are, great fans of the Animal Justice Party. It's all part of us as well. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to us if you leave a comment and let us know maybe one of the key takeaways you got from listening to Emma. And we will catch you next time on the Vegan Compass podcast.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
be sure to follow us on social media at @thevegancompass_podcast. See you next time.